Today on the Dr. Brian McDonough Show, a look at the development of a life-saving vaccine. It has saved millions of lives since its development. Also, a little bit of humor. It's all next on the Dr. Brian McDonough Show.
The Dr. Brian McDonough Show.
We all know that winter is a time when kids get sick, and January through March is the peak time for a very common childhood disease. It's called the rotavirus. If not treated, it can be a killer. More than 800,000 children around the world die from it each year. The virus is easily passed from child to child, especially in places like daycare centers. Kids from 6 months to 4 years old are the most at risk. But there is hope that a vaccine will be widely available later this year. Joining us this morning, the Vice Chairman of Family Medicine at Temple University in Philadelphia, Dr. Brian McDonough. Thank you so much for joining us this morning to talk about this. Now, a lot of people are familiar, of course, with kids getting sick, getting the flu. But this is a very serious form of it. Can you tell us what rotavirus is?
Sure. It's a virus that actually attacks the GI system, the intestines, the stomach. It gets into the body, and it stays there for days, and that's one of the problems. A lot of viruses go away. You know, they last for a day, and they're gone, and you're over it. This thing lingers, and that's a big problem. The second thing is, you mentioned it, January to March is a key period, and during that time, if I see somebody with those symptoms, I know it's rotavirus.
Well, let's talk specifically about the symptoms. What sort of symptoms should a parent look for and say this might be rotavirus?
Well, what's interesting, there are three things. There's vomiting, fever, and diarrhea. Those three things together are really unique to rotavirus when they all occur together. And if you look at those three things, they all lead to dehydration. So if you're a child and you don't have that much water to begin with in your body, you lose it through the fever, through the heat, you lose it through vomiting and diarrhea, you can get dehydrated and run into trouble very fast.
So if you only have one of those symptoms, chances are it's just a normal flu. But if your child shows all three, then it's probably then he or she probably has the rotavirus?
I think so, especially this time of year. Now, if you were talking to me in July or August, I'd say no, we have to worry about other things. But in that January to March period, yes, I'm worried about rotavirus, and I'm worried that it's going to progress and continue if something isn't done about it.
How is it passed from child to child?
Mostly it's from hand-to-hand contact. We in medicine call it the fecal-oral route, but really it's slobbering on a toy. Another child comes in and plays with that toy. They play with each other, they touch each other, and it gets passed back and forth. And as adults, we can pass it back and forth to each other. We just don't get it as bad because we've built up antibodies or immunity over time.
So what can you do to protect your child? Is there anything you can do?
Well, the first thing, and I always stress this, is call your physician. If you think you've got it, there's nothing wrong with calling your doctor. And when you call your doctor, really say, I think I have a problem. A lot of times I'm on call and I'll answer a parent's question. I ask them, please don't minimize it. Is this a problem? Because we want to get them in. The second thing is control the fever, and the third is replenish fluids. Keep those fluids up. If you have a child who is low in those fluids, you want to keep them well hydrated.
Let's talk about, and this is the tough part, but the worst case scenario, if you let rotavirus go untreated, what can happen?
Well, unfortunately, 500 people every year in the United States die from rotavirus because they got dehydrated and it was let go too far. I've seen cases where it's gotten to that point where you're trying to replenish fluids in the hospital setting with an IV, and you're trying to do everything you can, and it just doesn't help because it's too late. It doesn't happen that often because most people get in touch with their doctor. Most people try to use common sense, but in isolated situations it occurs.
Is this the kind of thing that you should let go for 24 or 48 hours, or should you call that doctor right away if you see all three of these symptoms?
Sarah, I think you should call the doctor right away. Now, your doctor might say, we can do these things at home, we'll manage it from home, but you at least have somebody in on it with you, because children, especially in this 6-month to 3-year range, they get dehydrated so fast, it can happen in a matter of hours.
When you talk about how common this is, in the Northeast, how big a problem is rotavirus?
In the Northeast, if I see those symptoms right now, I'm assuming it's rotavirus before anything else. In the rest of the country, especially in more temperate areas, it will occur throughout the year more sporadically. But in the Northeast and even into the Midwest, we're talking about rotavirus as being the cause right now.
And quickly, if you can, news on a vaccine?
Well, there are 2 vaccines actually that are available. The problem is they're not yet available, approved through the FDA. What will happen is it's given orally. I have a 4-year-old, a 2-year-old, and a 2-month-old. And I deal with them all in those situations. The youngest 2 would get the vaccine. The 4-year-old wouldn't need it because the 4-year-old actually has built immunity already.
All right, so young children in particular. Dr. Brian McDonough, thank you so much for joining us this morning to talk about this.
I know your schedule is incredibly busy. I appreciate it.
My pleasure. We've known each other for a long time.
We have. One of my favorite stories, I tell it often, is for those who may know or may not know, Dr. Offit is a leader in the world of vaccines and vaccine developments and thoughts about them. And he developed a rotavirus vaccine. And I remember in the, early 1990s, I was on the Today Show talking about rotavirus and how concerning it was as an issue. And I knew a little bit about him developing the vaccine. And when it came out, it was developed. And on the radio station I work for in Philadelphia, KYW News Radio, I talked about this new vaccine, which was given a name. It was a rotavirus vaccine, and it was spelled Rotateq. And I went, there's a new vaccine. It's called Rotate Q. Rotate Q. And I always remember I got a call and you said it's Rotatech. And I think I asked them, are you sure? And you're like, well, I invented it. And I always remember that, like, what a stupid question. But the fact that you took time, to avoid me that embarrassment because I never heard it spoken. Early, I mean, that's relatively early in your career. How does it feel to, first of all, do something like that, have that kind of impact on generations now of helping them? It's got to be a great feeling.
Yeah, I mean, I was fortunate enough to be part of a team at Children's Hospital Philadelphia with Doctors Stanley Plotkin and Fred Clark to do that. I mean, it was a 25-year effort. Rotaviruses kill more babies in the world every day than any other infectious disease. So this vaccine, developed with that team at Children's Hospital Philadelphia, probably saves hundreds of lives every day. It's certainly the professional accomplishment of which I'm most proud.